Father God, we just thank you so much for this evening and this time that we get to come together and study your word once again. We pray that it would just be abundantly fruitful and that you would bless us as we seek after you and seek to understand what you have recorded of yourself and of your character for us to know. And we do love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. It was pointed out to me that I missed something last week that I wanted to cover and that I knew I wanted to cover, and apparently my mom also knew I wanted to cover and I didn't cover. So in Genesis chapter 8, all the way back, Genesis chapter 8, like Noah and the flood and all that, I told you to put a date in the back of your mind when we were reading that, and I don't know if you remember it, but it says that in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat. So this is after the flood, the waters are going down, and the ark hits the mountain. So that happens in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month. Why does that date matter to us based on what we studied last week? Sorry? Today. No, not the Day of Atonement. Close though. It is one of the feasts. So last week we talked about how the calendar flipped when they came out at the Exodus. It was the 7th month, and then God said this month will be the 1st month of your calendar, right? And so if Noah landed on Ararat in the 7th month, then after the calendar flipped, it would be the 1st month. So he landed in the month of Nisan, or Abib, on the 17th day of the month. So what else happened in the month of Nisan on the 17th day of the month? Passover. It was the day, remember, you bring the lamb into your house on the 10th day, and then you kill it on the 14th day. So 3 days after the 14th day would be probably, and again, Jewish calendar is hard because it's so different from ours, would probably be the Sunday after the lamb was killed. So if you fast forward that up to Jesus, he enters Jerusalem on the 10th day of Nisan, which is Abib. It was changed to Nisan during the Babylonian exile. He was killed on the 14th day, and he would have been resurrected on the Sunday following that. So Jesus' resurrection lines up with the time when the ark lands on Mount Ararat. Isn't that cool? Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about last week and I missed. Neat. So I would love to start tonight with a volunteer who would be willing to stand up and in a really good, loud speaking voice in about 2 or 2.5 minutes summarize the story of the Bible from creation up to now. Like now meaning where we're at in our study, not now today. From Genesis 1 to Exodus 18. Is anybody willing to just give it a shot? Anyone at all? I don't think anyone wants to give it a shot. Everyone's looking at Petra.
Petra's great.
Do you want to give it a shot? It's okay if you miss little things. I'm only going to give you 2 minutes. So if you miss little things, you can blame me.
I won't blame you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Do I stand up?
Absolutely.
You just got louder.
Oh my gosh. All right. In the beginning, there was just a barren wasteland, and God wanted to create mankind in the world, and so he created the world in 7 days. And then he created man and realized that it was not good for man to be alone, and then he created from his rib a helper. And they lived in the garden, and they were allowed to eat from everything except one apple. I mean, one tree. And that tree was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And while they were in the garden, they were unashamed. There was no shame. So the serpent tricked Eve. She took of the apple, and then it gave some to her husband, and her husband willingly ate of the apple as well. And then God had to send them out sent them out of the garden and put the angels and the cherubims to guard them so that they could not come back in and live forever in their sin, in their death. So then they were fruitful and multiplied and filled the earth and lived for many years. And there was one that walked with God, and that was righteous and walked with God. His name was Noah. And everything else was evil on the earth, and God instructed Noah to build an ark. And I don't remember if he told him that it was going to rain or not, but he told him to build this ark and gave him explicit instructions. And when the ark was finished, he told him to fill it with all of these animals and to be shut up in the ark. Then the waters came, flooded the earth, rid it of all the evil, and the 8 of them were there and survived. They found dry land, and then Noah exposed his nakedness, and they were fruitful and multiplied and filled the earth again. I don't.
Great job. You're stuck?
Yeah, I'm stuck.
You're stuck. Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone want to pick up from there?
Talking from Noah to Exodus?
Yep. You want to do it? Go ahead.
I can, sure. Okay. So after Noah and his 3 sons landed and reestablished society and started having children, and humanity began to boom again, everyone moved into a land called Babylon, which keeps coming up thematically. And humanity kind of decided, instead of doing what God wanted, to build a name for themselves, and they decided to build a big city and a big tower, which, because it was all based on their own pride and building a name for themselves, God came down and, instead of destroying humanity, scrambled everybody's speech so they couldn't understand each other, and they had to leave off building the city. After that, it jumps pretty quickly to a man named Abraham, who was living in that vicinity, who God told to leave his family and his father's household and go to a place he was calling him, which Abraham did. And Abraham went to a land which was the land of Canaan, and God promised to bless him and give him descendants that would number like the stars of the sky or the sand of the city, the sand somewhere, I don't know. And he would bless him and bless those who blessed him and curse those who cursed him and his descendants, and also that the world would be blessed through his descendants, carrying the theme of the seed that through which Satan's head would be crushed and through which the world would be blessed. And Abraham, who did not have a child at the time and didn't seem to be able to, without getting all the details, God blessed him when he was very old with a child. And that child was Isaac. Isaac then had Jacob. Jacob then had 12 sons. And I don't know how detailed I want to get here. So
Not too detailed.
Yeah, okay. So basically 12 sons, and a bunch of stuff happened that had them wind up in Egypt, where they were there for 430 years, because that was predicted way back to Abraham. And they grew even more, got even more. Israel themselves went from just 12 people and their kids to a huge nation. They were enslaved. They had to be removed. God brought them out using a lot of curses or plagues. And is that about where we're at?
That's about where we're at. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So absolutely. So God brought him out, and then there was a couple of events and some fights and some things like that before they get to Sinai. Yeah, great job. Have you guys read Acts chapter 7 recently? Do you know who that chapter is about? Do you remember?
Moses.
So there's this guy named Stephen, and he's one of the deacons that are chosen in Acts chapter 6. And the religious leaders of the time incited people to bring accusations against Stephen in the same way like the Pharisees incited the crowds against Jesus. And what happened is they brought Stephen into a court, and they made him basically give a defense for himself as the people were picking up the stones to kill him. And what he does in Acts chapter 7 is unbelievable. If you have the time this week, just read Acts chapter 7, it'll blow your mind. He gives one of the greatest expositions on the story of the Old Testament as he is facing the people who are about to kill him. And it's mind-blowing how he does it. And so for us, and I think you two did an amazing job, going through the pre-patriarchal history and then the patriarchal history is kind of how you broke it up, which was perfect. But like, for me, I think about, there may or there may not in our lifetime come a time when you have to really stand on what you believe in the face of like real persecution, and not just like people at work disagree with your faith, but like real persecution. And Stephen, I think, is one of the best examples of how to do that, and how he went through the Old Testament and ended it with Jesus, and then he goes, "Who you killed," which I just love. But so yeah, I wanted to just kind of start with that and give you that encouragement of like, you guys know the story better than you think you do, and also just remind us like we are in a story. We're about to start a new type of literature tonight. Instead of reading a narrative like we have been, the narrative is about to come to an abrupt halt, and we are going to start reading legal code. And it can be boring, it can be frustrating, it can be challenging because it doesn't fit into the legal code or even ethics of our own society and culture at times. And so I wanted to just kind of start us into that literature style with the understanding that even though we're stepping out of narrative, we're still in a story. And this is still going on in the context of the things around it. You with me? Does that make sense? All right, here we go. Exodus chapter 19 is where we're starting tonight. On the third new moon, after the people had gone out of the land of Egypt. What does that mean? If we were to put that in our own layman's terms.
My Bible says the third month.
The third month, so it would be 3 months later. Okay, why new moon though? If it just means 3 months later, why new moon? Our calendar, the Gregorian calendar, is solar. It's based off of the position of the sun. The Hebrew calendar is lunar. It's not based off of the position of the sun, but it's based off of the reflection of the sun off of the moon. And so you have your new moon, you have your waning and waxing and all of those things that go on with, how the moon works. And the way that they would start a month is they would have people, and this isn't biblical, by the way, this comes out of, I think it comes out of the Talmud. I would have to look up the reference for you, I'm not sure. But the way that they would start a new month is they would have priests in the cities of the Levites all throughout Israel. And those priests in different locations would all be responsible for watching the moon. And when they said, today is the new moon, at least 3 different priests or leaders from 3 different places would have to verify that it was the new moon, and all of them would come to Jerusalem, later on Jerusalem, once that was where the temple was set up, or the tabernacle was set up. They would come to Jerusalem, and it would be verified by the high priest, and once you had 3 priests from 3 different locations, plus the high priest, all agree that it was the new moon, that was the day the new month started. So that's when they would know, okay, now it's not Nisan anymore, now it's the next month, or now it's the next month. And then the Sabbath for Israel was at the beginning of the week and the end of the week. It was really how they marked time. But you didn't want to just say, okay, well, there's the new moon, tomorrow's the Sabbath, because no one's ready to not work for a day. If people don't have a day to prepare and to make preparations, then they just are not going to eat the next day. So what would happen is they would go, okay, there's the new moon, so now we're going to have the day of preparation and then the Sabbath. And so on the Hebrew calendar, most months would actually end up starting on what we would refer to as Friday, and then that would be the day of preparation, and then Saturday was the Sabbath, and then Sunday was the 3rd, and then that week goes the 3rd through the 9th, and then the 10th would be Sunday. And that's why, one of the reasons why we know that when Jesus enters Jerusalem at the triumphal entry on the 10th of Nisan, it was a Sunday, so that his resurrection's on a Sunday, and how we can line that up with the preparations that were being made for the Passover that week when he was killed and everything going on like that. Cool? Hebrew calendars are kind of tough because they're so different from ours, so it's really hard to sort of make all of this work as we try to put one calendar on top of another calendar. So I am pretty sure, I'm like 99% sure that everything I just said was right, but I misspeak a lot, so if it wasn't, give me grace. Okay. All right, so 3 months after they left the land of Egypt, they arrived at Mount Sinai, and on that day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from Rephidim and came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mountain, while Moses went up to God. Yahweh called to him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, tell all the people, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and these are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." A lot just happened in that one line, and then a couple of things that we need to talk about. Do you know anywhere that talks about eagle's wings in the Bible? Isaiah. So when I was growing up, my mom had this cloth Bible cover, and probably for like 15 years I saw it basically every day, and it had Isaiah chapter 40 on it. I'll lift you up on eagle's wings, and you'll run and not grow weary, and walk and not grow faint. And so Isaiah chapter 40, right? But check this out. Revelation 12. Did I put the right thing? Yeah, Revelation 12, verse 4. This is the prophecy. I put the wrong reference. It's not 12:4.
12:14. Did you hear Petra?
Is it 14?
I believe her. Yeah,
Two wings like a
Oh, you're so right. Okay, so this is the prophecy of the battle between the woman and the dragon in Revelation. If you're not really familiar with what this is talking about, it's totally fine. Revelation's tough. But in this battle, this woman, who is a representation of Israel, the one who would bear this male child that the dragon wanted to devour, it says, the woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness. So isn't that Revelation 12? Doesn't that sound so much like what's happening in Israel right here that we're reading about? Israel is flying from Egypt, making flight into the wilderness, and the way it's described is God putting them on wings like eagles. So you kind of go, I wonder where John got that from. It sort of seems like he was really familiar with the Old Testament, right? Because in the way that he describes Israel is exactly the way that God, through Moses, describes Israel. Then he says, covenant, super important, but I don't want to spend time on that just yet. You will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So what is a priest?
Go-between.
The go-between. So, absolutely, that's encompassed in what I'm about to say. I want you to remember one word when it comes to priests, so that when I say, what is a priest, you go, it's this. It is someone who mediates. Mediates. That's the main role of a priest. And the priests in Israel, their job was to mediate between the people outside the tabernacle and God inside the tabernacle. Because the people, they couldn't just go in, and God wouldn't just come out. The role of the priest was to be the mediator between God and man. And a holy, or a set apart, or sanctified, or I love this one. This is too small. You can't read it. I forgot to make this big. Okay. Consecrated for, or forfeit to the sanctuary. I love that one. If something is holy, it's something that has been forfeited to the sanctuary, like sacrificed wholly to God. They were supposed to be a holy nation, which in essence just means a nation that's different than all the other nations around them, somehow consecrated or separate. So if a priest is the mediator between the people outside the tabernacle and God inside the tabernacle, then if you take that to a national scale, what does it mean that Israel was to be a kingdom of priests?
Mediate between the Gentiles.
Yeah, totally. I can't hear what you're saying, Petra.
That they were, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like that they were the mediator between God and the people.
And the other nations.
Right?
Right. So take the priests of Israel and take that picture onto a national scale. So now Israel is the priesthood of the nations. So that as you have all these nations around, it's Israel who's supposed to be the mediator. Okay, so what does that mean for us in the New Testament? Because we've heard that term before, haven't we? Kingdom of priests.
What verse are you on?
I'm looking at verse 5, 6.
6.
You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So, Peter, I forgot to write the reference. Holy nation, holy kingdom, priest. Here's what we're going to do. Priest, and then go to Peter. That's Maccabees.
All the Leviticus references.
All the Leviticus ones. Okay, here's Peter, that's Hebrews. Where's Peter?
Later.
He's supposed to be right there. What happened? Sorry guys, I totally forgot to look up this reference, but it's a really important one. Oh, that's because he says priesthood. That's why. There we go. All right. You yourselves are like living stones being built up as a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. That's 1 Peter 2:9. That is Peter taking what God has said about Israel here in Exodus chapter 19 and applying it to the church. And when we talk about attachment theology, right, this is one of the ways in which the church is now a part of Israel, fulfilling what Israel was supposed to do in the first place. I want to take this then to Revelation chapter 1.
I have a question about that, but why don't we finish?
Let me get through this one as well.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Did I do it again? Where is it?
Priest who
There
is
it
God.
is. Verse 5. Verse 6, yeah. Starting halfway through verse 5. To him who loves us and has freed us from our sins by his blood and made us a kingdom, priests to God his Father, to his God and Father, to him be glory and dominion forever and ever, amen. So again, now John is taking that same idea of Israel being a kingdom of priests, the priesthood of the nations, and applying that to the church. It is this intensely evangelistic view of what Israel was supposed to be and what they were called out of the other nations to do.
So I have always known that, like what Peter is saying, even Paul had said, talking about being grafted in, so that's kind of the same concept. But what you were just revealing here is that it was the way it was supposed to be all, even in the Old Testament.
Yep.
Then when Jesus was traveling through Tyre and he came across that woman, why did he say that then? If in Old Testament it's there and
The woman with the
that says even
Even the dogs eat the scraps that fall under the table.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he was drawing out her faith.
Yes, but he had said, I am not. What was
I was basically that he was called to the Jews
He
and
was
not the
called to the
Gentiles.
Jews and not to the Gentiles. So I realize that he was doing it for that reason. However, he's not going to lie to or pretend ignorance either, would he? In order to draw out somebody's faith.
That's a really good question that I am not prepared to do justice
Okay,
for an answer
that's
to.
fine.
So at that point in time, though, he hadn't been crucified, he hadn't been resurrected. His ministry was still to the Jews because they were still the chosen people
Yeah.
until the resurrection.
So that's a really good point, because the ministry to Gentiles doesn't really kick off until Paul starts it after his salvation on the road to Damascus.
How
So-
many Gentiles did Jesus minister to, though?
Quite a few. quite a few. Not only the Sidonian woman that you're talking about, but also the woman at the well in Samaria. Like, there's kind of a list. And I mean, even the Sermon on the Mount. Like, there was a group of people from the Decapolis. It wasn't just Jews that he was preaching to. It was Jews and Gentiles at the Sermon on the Mount. So yeah, it was a huge number.
Is that kind of like he's called to Israel, but if Gentiles come, he's not going to be like, no.
Right. Well, he also pronounces what we just went over in Isaiah on a couple of Sundays or Wednesdays ago with the vineyard and the wild grapes.
Yeah, Isaiah 5.
And then he basically says that straight up to the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious elite.
Yeah. Because that Isaiah 5 passage with the vineyard, that is about Israel being the thing that God nurtured and all that. And then they produced wild grapes. Their fruit wasn't good.
Right.
In other words, they didn't keep the law, to put it that way.
And Jesus, in his parable with the vineyard, he basically said it was about them, and that's why they wanted to kill him.
Yeah, totally.
He was relating that to him. So I don't. His ministry was to the Jews, but it had to. He was after parts of it.
Absolutely. But that is
He
that.
had to have known from the beginning
Uh-huh.
of this.
Yes.
He had to have, right?
Oh yeah.
Sure. So maybe.
So let me, for the sake of time and
Sure.
moving on, let me just say it's a really good question, and I was not prepared to answer it. But I'm certain there's a really good answer out there. Okay. So verse 7. Moses called the elders of the people. So who are these guys from last week? The elders?
70 father-in-law.
Yep.
Told him to have a council.
Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah. So Jethro, his father-in-law, in the last chapter in Exodus chapter 18 said, you can't lead these people. You can't be the only judge. You have to bring people up to help you out. These were the elders. And so he calls the elders and he sets before them all these words that Yahweh had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, okay, so I had a teacher in Uganda who did this as a chant. So that it has never left my brain. And so I'm going to give it to you guys so that it never leaves your brain either, okay? It goes like this. All the Lord has spoken, we will do. So I'd love for you to do that with me. Ready? Get your hands ready. Ready? All right, 1, 2, 3. All the Lord has spoken, we will do. Okay. Now, does that happen?
No.
So if you know the biblical story, you understand that that's a joke. Okay. And Moses reported the words of the people back to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moses, behold, I'm coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever. When Moses told the words of the people to Yahweh, Yahweh said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people, and you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, take care not to go up into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot, whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. So Moses went down the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. Okay, so,
Fun place
yeah.
to start.
Why? So one of the things going on with that is when you look at the purpose of consecration throughout the law, because there are certainly others, one of the main reasons for it is preparing yourself to go to war. And so one of the things that they would do right before they went into a battle is they wouldn't be with their wives for 3 days. And there are some people who have speculated that it would make men more aggressive. And then there are also the idea of just the impurities of bodily fluids in Leviticus and things like that, where you just want to be pure when you go into battle. So that's a great question, and the answer to it is sort of forthcoming as we get further into the Torah. Okay, so in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He made the earth, whatever, formless, void, draw a circle. He put a garden in it. At the Garden of Eden, thinking Genesis 2, where did humanity live? Where's the dwelling place of man?
Outside the garden until they put them in.
Well, outside the garden, Adam didn't live outside the garden. He was made outside the garden and then put into the garden, right? So this is the dwelling place of man. Is that represented by that circle? Where was the dwelling place of God? Inside the garden. So this is also the dwelling place of God. So the dwelling place of God and the dwelling place of man are totally together, completely overlapped. There's no place that one can go, the other can't go, anything like that, right? Adam and Eve sinned. They go where? So new dwelling place of man. Imagine this is like a timeline, so going forward in time. New dwelling place of man, and where is God? Sort of everywhere, because you see him talking with various people throughout the story. Literarily speaking, I think what's going on is you're seeing a separation take place. So you have him, God and man, dwelling places not overlapping. Now we get to Mount Sinai, and God says, I'm going to come down on the mountain, right? So where does man live? Just on the earth, okay? And where is God right now when he comes down on the mountain?
On the top corner.
Right on the top corner. So what you have here at Sinai is this overlap of the dwelling place of God and the dwelling place of man. And then what was the prevalent number in the passage we just read?
3.
3 days. So in 3 days, the dwelling place of God and the dwelling place of man are going to overlap. So mankind needed to be consecrated, they needed to be set apart and made pure so that they were ready for God's dwelling to overlap our dwelling. So Moses told the people, go consecrate yourselves. There's going to be a long trumpet blast, which is again going to come up in Leviticus and in Numbers. And the use of trumpets in Israel to assemble the congregation or to gather the people. On the morning of the 3rd day, there were thunders and lightnings and thick cloud on the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast so that all the people in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They took their stand at the foot of the mountain. And Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because Yahweh had descended on it in fire. The smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountains, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. So, we have a mountain. And here is God in fire. Here is Israel at the bottom, and Moses goes up. But all the people stay at the bottom. So far, so good. Okay. And the Lord spoke to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to Yahweh to look, and many of them perish. Also, let the priests who come near to Yahweh consecrate themselves, lest Yahweh break out against them. Who are the priests? Do we have priests yet?
No.
Yes, we do. The whole nation is priests, right? God just said, I'm going to make you a kingdom of priests. Okay, so the whole nation, all the people, keep them down there. All the priests, they can't come up. And Moses said to Yahweh, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, set limits around the mountain and consecrate it. And Yahweh said to him, go down and come up, bringing Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people walk through to come up to Yahweh, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. Cool. So this is what the camp looks like. You have the people at the bottom, God at the top, and Moses going up and down, bringing messages back and forth. What is the role of the priest? Mediator. What is Moses doing? Mediating between God and the people. Awesome. You guys are on it. So, what is the thing that God tells Moses first? Of all the things, this is the thing, the laws that introduce all the other laws. It is the 10 Commandments. So we're going to go ahead and just save this so that we can come back to it. Whoops. Oh my goodness. That's the worst.
Mount at.
I could not type for whatever reason. We're just going to put that right on the
Do
desktop.
we have time for some questions?
What's that?
There's a few questions. Do we have time
Yes, we always have time for
So
questions.
we'll have one first, and then I have a second clarification.
Go ahead.
You're saying that Moses was being the mediator when you just said that the nation was supposed to be the mediators. So does that mean they're failing to be mediators?
That is a amazing question, and there is about 4 books that I know of written just on that question alone. Probably dozens more that I don't know about. Man, that's too much to get into right now. I would say that the nation is supposed to be the mediators between God and other nations. And Moses serves as the mediator between God and the individual people right now. That's going to shift later. And there are scholars who firmly take the stance that it was because of Israel's failure to go on the mountain that they are restricted from going on the mountain, and it causes them to be separated from God. I'm not sure I take that stance just because of the order of things that happen. God forbids them from coming on the mountain before they refuse to come on the mountain. So to me, that argument doesn't make a lot of sense. Is that okay? Because we don't have much time to say any more than that. Okay, cool. And your question was the same?
Almost the same.
Okay.
So I kind of cleared up some of it. So Moses was the mediator between God and the people, but when he said don't bring the priests up, the people, so does that mean that all the people of Israel were all priests at that time?
Well, there was no priesthood in Israel yet. The only priesthood is Israel to the nations at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it also possible that there were some people who were doing some kind of priest thing?
It could be talking about the elders, if you want to take it that way.
Well, because I mean, there's always priests even before there's official priests, and
Sure.
so maybe some people just were doing that already, even without it
Maybe.
being.
If they were, I would think they would be the elders that were appointed through Jethro. Yeah. What you got, Mark?
So back in verse 5 where he's calling a priest, but he says you shall be. I mean, is it possible that's talking about sometime in the future and not right now?
I think both. I think this is, and I could be wrong, but I think this is one of those times where God is saying, this is what I'm going to do with you, and it is almost an immediate, like, now this is who you are, but also it's a task for the future.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question. Go ahead.
This is a little speculation.
Okay.
Peter has called us a priesthood. So we're going to be priests. And we are priests in the sense that we are sharing the truth of the gospel with an unbelieving world. What about during the millennium when we are going to rule and reign with Jesus?
Ooh, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure I have time to tackle it right now. Okay, sorry. It deserves more than I have the time for, is what I'm trying to say.
Well,
Okay.
that's speculation. I don't have any answer either.
Okay, well, I don't feel bad then. So, okay, chapter 20, 10 Commandments, right? How familiar are y'all with the 10 Commandments? Pretty? Roughly? Okay, what's the first one? So, I am Yahweh your God. You will have no other gods. And immediately that means what? That there are other gods. Okay, you will have no other gods before me. What does it mean before me?
Above me, instead of me,
Higher.
where I should be.
In priority to me? Okay,
In my presence.
you're wrong. The Hebrew here, they actually take out one of the words to make it into English. The Hebrew is al paneh. And you wouldn't know this because you read Genesis 1 in Hebrew, but in Genesis 1, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Al paneh, Hamayim is waters, al paneh is over the face of, or on the face of, paneh is face. What God is saying is, you will have no other gods before my face. In other words, the place where I live is for me, and you will not take other gods in there. Are you with me? It is not priority. Okay. I know that that is different than what you maybe have ever heard.
Evangelical
So,
church.
no other gods before my face. What's number 2? No carved images. So we're going to call those idols. Now, what's an idol? anything you put before God. No, it's not anything you put before God. In the Bible, there's not a single instance of a conceptual idol. Every idol in the Bible is something carved of wood or of stone or made of metal. I see your hand. You can put it down. I'll come to you when I'm done talking, so you don't have to keep holding it up. There is, like we talk about, oh, the TV's my idol. The Seahawks are my idol. You guys are Broncos. The Broncos are my idol. I'm a Seahawks fan, sorry. Unless you are carving out your TV of stone and then bowing down to it in your living room, you're using idol differently than how the Bible uses idol. We have a colloquial use, and so that's fine. We understand what each other means. I just want you to understand that that is not the biblical use of what an idol means. To have an idol is a carved image of wood or stone or metal, okay? Go ahead.
So my question is, you're not to have any of these carved images made with your hands. I mean, he has altars that are made natural.
Yes.
But you're not to carve them or form them with tools.
Mm-hmm.
What about like churches that have cross?
Oh. You mean like today?
Well, no, I mean,
Or like back?
yeah, many churches have.
But you mean today?
Yeah.
Of course you do, because the cross wasn't a symbol in the Old Testament of anything, because it came around in the New. Simple answer, Jesus fulfilled the law.
Okay.
Much more complicated answer to be had than that, but I've got like
Okay.
50 minutes till we're done, and we're only in the second chapter. But it's a good question. Jesus fulfilled the law, so are we looking to keep these commandments today? Is this like, for me, am I trying to keep the 10 Commandments?
I am, at the best I can.
Yeah, or you're saying no.
It's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let me put it this way. Is salvation predicated upon you keeping the 10 Commandments?
No.
Definitely not, right? So is salvation predicated upon you? Thank you. Is salvation? No. And we can do this with any law, right? Is salvation determined by whether or not a man cuts the corner of his hair and gets the Hasidic curls?
Nope.
Of course not. Okay, but what about laws that we determine to be moral rather than ceremonial, although that's not a biblical distinction? Is salvation predicated upon you loving your neighbor?
No, but that's what God wants us to do.
Certainly. That's a good work, right? And James says that good works will flow out of faith, and faith without works is dead, right? But to have faith, you don't have to do any of those things, right? The thief on the cross never loved his neighbor, and Jesus said, "You'll be with me in paradise." He never loved his neighbor, but you know what I'm trying to say. So it's go. You talk.
Sorry, Paul says that all things are lawful.
Yes.
He says all things are lawful.
Totally.
Not all things are good. But
Totally. All things are lawful. Yeah.
not predicated on us.
So I guess my point in saying this is, as we're diving into law, we want to keep in mind that Jesus fulfilled it. Well, simultaneously, we have sort of a tension as we study the law, because we want to see all the ways that we fall short. And if a church making a cross out of wood breaks this law, then that is a way that we are disqualified by our actions from God's perfection. Through Jesus, we get forgiveness from that disqualification. In the same sense that when I shaved my beard on Saturday night so that I looked good to come teach on Sunday morning, that action disqualified me from God's perfection. Just shaving my face. Okay? So there's a lot more to it than that, and we're going to talk about this for the next few months. So let's just keep pressing, and then we'll just keep bringing this up over and over again. Number 3, do you know?
Lord's name in vain.
Lord's name in vain. Okay, I want to read this one because it's important. The wording is probably not what you expect. You shall not take the name of Yahweh, your God, your Elohim, in vain, for Yahweh will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. So what does it mean to take the name of Yahweh?
To use it insincerely.
To use it insincerely. Okay, so the normal way that we interpret this is that when I stub my toe, what I should not do is say, "Oh my God," or stub my toe and say, "Jesus Christ." That's a big no-no because it breaks the 10 Commandments, right? Check this out. Numbers chapter 6, verse, it's over here, 27. oops, not 36, Numbers 6:27. This is the Aaronic blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. You probably heard this before. It ends with this line. So they, being the priests, shall put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them. So for Israel to take God's name means, in the same sense that if you look at the priesthood on a national level, they ought to be recognizable by all the other nations. They will bear the name of Yahweh to all the other nations. They are taking the Lord's name. Are you with me? So what does it mean then to take the Lord's name in vain?
Ooh, to present
lie,
yourself.
to
and
mislead.
It's the betrayal of commitment or covenant.
In front of the other nations, really, right?
It's not cursing.
It's not cursing. It has to do with how is Israel going to represent Yahweh to the nations around.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, I
should
get
you
that.
say Jesus Christ when you stub your toe?
No.
Probably not, because Paul tells us to have edifying language, right? Is that going to build the people up around you? No, it's not. It's not edifying language. But don't think that by not saying, oh my God, you're keeping the 10 Commandments, right? It's totally not what it's talking about. Okay, how you doing?
Wow, that's amazing.
Because doesn't
Have
the
a-
word literally mean to carry?
To carry. Well, let's check. Exodus 20.
Nasa.
You shall not take Nasa. Yeah, carry.
I just
Nasa. You know
looked
how I
it up.
remember that one? Is NASA. NASA. It's, the shuttle carries things into space. NASA is to lift up, right? Okay, that's how I remember that Hebrew word. Nasa. Yeah, don't take up or don't lift up or don't carry the name of Yahweh in vain. Number 4.
So in other words, don't put the church sticker on your car and then drive like the devil.
Okay, this is, you're
Oh,
touching on
boy.
nerve for me because in my mind there is no greater gauge for someone's morality than how they treat the people on the road around them.
That's why John doesn't speed.
I don't. I set my cruise control to the speed limit and laugh all day while people fly by me flipping me off. It's the best. And it makes me so prideful and I'm working on it. Okay, so Lord's name. Number 4.
Holy the Sabbath.
Sabbath. Okay, any questions on that one? We're going to talk a lot about Sabbath as we get further into the Torah. This one kind of just means what it says, right? It's not like the others that I've been like poking at as we've gone. Number 5.
Honor your father and mother.
Honor your father and mother. And what will happen?
You will live long.
Not on the earth,
The land.
in the land that I am giving to you. So this is the commandment that recognizes the promised land. And if you take this forward, and I hope you guys have been paying attention in a couple of last few Sunday sermons I've been teaching on Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, those blessings for obedience,
Right.
part of that is living in the land, and the cursing for disobedience is being taken out of the land. So it's like this commandment of honoring your father and mother is responsible for bearing the weight of the blessing or cursing. So if you kept all the other laws but didn't do this one, I mean that's true of any single law, but you would be guilty of the whole law, as James says, if you stumble in the least. But this one law is just really interesting because it kind of bears that summary of the entire law.
Wow.
Number 6, murder. Number 7, adultery. These ones are all a lot simpler. Number 8, steal. Number 9,
Bearing false witness.
bear false witness. So we could say lie, and that is included in bearing false witness, but this isn't just saying don't lie. It's talking about being taken to court to give testimony about whether a person is guilty or innocent of a crime. What would be the reason that you would bear false witness about somebody?
For selfish gain.
Selfish gain, take a bribe. If the plaintiff is poor and the defendant is rich, and the defendant wants to get out of the accusation, he could pay you off to bear false witness about it. And what would that do to the justice that the court is trying to seek? You'd have subversion of justice, skewed justice. So this, yes, lying is included, but what this is really dealing with is social justice. And then 10, covet. All right. That's your 10 commandments. You notice the separation here between 4 and 5? You've probably seen this before. 1 through 4 are dealing with your relationship with God. 5 through 6 are dealing with your relationship with other people. And so as Jesus summarizes the law and the prophets, he says they all hang on 2 commands. They are,
The Lord your God.
yeah,
Love others as yourself.
there you go. What you got?
So, number 3.
Yes.
Same thing. As believers, we go out and live worldly yet sharing the Lord's name. Is that taking the Lord's name in vain?
I would say it is. Absolutely. And of course, we look to Jesus for forgiveness of that because every one of us falls short, right? But I would say that is exactly what that's talking about. Yeah. Okay? Everyone good? Yes.
This might be more than we can get into right now.
It probably is. We have
Thou
40
shalt
minutes.
not murder.
Yes.
And then it's okay to go to war and kill your enemy. But when is it, I hate my enemy and I'm killing him, when is that not murder?
I think the law addresses when someone is to be put to death for something they did, and if that is not the case, then killing them would be murder, and then the person who did it would be avenged, and there's this whole thing about the avenger of blood.
I read through all that.
Uh-huh.
I get really confused, and a lot of it's because I'm really, really new to this.
No, you're doing great.
And it was a question I've always had.
Yeah.
Is there a
How do you know when a war is justified?
We're going to talk about that in maybe later tonight, but we're probably going to run out of time. We're more likely going to talk about that when we get to Deuteronomy 7. Let me just put it as simply as I can right now. The reason why the nations who inhabited the promised land before Israel are going to be wiped out is because they failed to keep the law. And that might make you go, but wait, God only gave the law to Israel and not to them. So how is it that they're responsible for keeping the law? We're going to get into all of that come Deuteronomy. Yeah. I saw a hand on this side. Sorry, I thought I saw Mark's hand, and then I'll come to you, Linda. Not, yeah, other Mark.
It was my understanding that you can kill as long as you are the arm of the government. You just don't kill on your own.
That is sort of the case. That is sort of the case. But the government in Israel is not government like we think about it. It's theocracy. So if you're the arm of the government in Israel, so I guess what I'm saying is I agree with you, but you have to redefine government in the case of the Bible, because it's not like today you're not, I don't want to get into politics, but in ancient Israel, the killing would be justified by the law and nothing else. And if it wasn't, then it was murder.
But does that apply to war, though? When it's King David sending armies out to
David's, I'm going to say yes, but I'm specifically thinking of the tribes in the Promised Land. I'm not thinking into the future yet. Linda had her hand up, and then we'll come to you, Mark.
Can you explain the blaspheming the Holy Spirit as, and like, I'm thinking like taking the Lord's name in vain is being a bad representative or going against what the Lord is. And is that tied into that?
Yes, I think so. And I don't have time to get into it right now. But I think you're right on track. Okay.
I just want to make a comment about the Roman Catholic religion, which
Sure.
I grew up in. The Ten Commandments in the Roman Catholic Church are different.
That's right. They are different.
They do away with number 2.
Yep.
And they split number 10 into 2.
Yeah, that's right.
You should not covet your neighbor's goods. Number 9, number 10 is
Yep.
you shall not covet your neighbor's wife.
That's right.
I was listening to a talk show, and I either wrote or called in because we were talking about which number was this commandment or that, and they were using the Roman Catholic commandments, and so their answer was, well, she's a Lutheran. Now, I don't know anything about the Lutheran religion, but apparently that carried over into the Lutheran religion also.
There are some things, so anytime you have a high church, Lutheran, Anglican, there are going to be carryover from the Catholic Church into the Protestant Church. Because Lutherans are part of the Protestant Church, but there is carryover. I mean, obviously they are, because the Protestant Church came out of Luther, who they're named for. So there's carryover from the Catholic Church into that, and there's far more tradition that's held onto and things like that. And so you may find that they have a Catholic version of the Protestant Bible, so they wouldn't have the Apocrypha, but they would have the Catholicized version of the rest of the text, where the Catholic Bible would have all of the Catholic version plus the Apocrypha. There's a lot of different Bibles out there.
And another reason I think why that was done is that virtually every Catholic church when I was growing up had the dead man still hanging on the cross and
Icons.
Jesus in his mother's arms.
Icons, yeah.
And when I was a kid growing up, we had a statue of Mary that was about this big with baby Jesus.
Yep.
And me and my three siblings used to fight over who could have it in there next to their bed.
And if you have a Bible that's written the way ours is written, you can't have that. So
But
they wouldn't want that.
That just means, and I know we're trying to hurry, but that, you know, and I thought about this earlier when you talked about what I'm going to say to you is that Jesus fulfilled the law. So a lot of Catholics turned Protestant, or even Protestants who never were Catholic and really, including myself, have really kind of come down on the whole Mary thing, the whole statue thing. In reality, if what you say is true, which we know it's true, is who cares? Really? Is that what we're...
I wouldn't say who cares. I think there's been an overcorrection in the Protestant church to undeify, if you will, Mary, as a pushback against the Catholic Church. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Mary should be deified, but I don't think she should be vilified either.
No, 100% right. But
Okay.
the whole praying to Mary isn't such a...
You probably shouldn't pray.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm like hearing what you're saying. So.
Yeah, totally. Okay, last comment before we keep going.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the word murder in the English has any specific connotation in the Hebrew.
The Hebrew word also covers causing human death from carelessness or negligence, which we're going to talk about the difference between killing someone carelessly and what happens in the Avenger situation versus killing someone intentionally and what happens in the Avenger situation. It's going to come up later. I mean, assuming we get there, which we're not on track to do currently. Okay, so that was the 10 Commandments. Altars, 22 through 26. I'm just going to fly through this. You read it on your own time. You can't have a gold altar. You can't have a silver altar. You can't have an altar made out of stone that is hewn. You can have an altar made out of stone that is not hewn, and you can have an altar made out of earth. In other words, the altar that God wants things sacrificed on is going to be made out of things made by Him and not made out of things made by you. Make sense? Okay. And then don't go up the steps of the altar. Cultures around Israel made altars into high things with a bunch of steps on them. But later on, the priests are going to be told to wear linen ephods when they're sacrificing on the altar. That's basically a dress-like undergarment. And if you walk up steps to get onto an altar and the people you're mediating for are all behind you, then you see what's taking place there. And you're dealing with that theme of nakedness, right? The priest is not supposed to be naked, uncovered before the people, shamed before the people, if they're mediating between God and man. They're the representation of God to man and the representation of man to God. If they're uncovering themselves before man, then they're misrepresenting God. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. Whew. All right, we got through the easy stuff. Now for the hard stuff. Laws about slaves. The Bible... Slavery in the Bible does not even come close to approximating American slavery.
Right.
Okay? So it's really hard to do, but just put it out of your mind right now that God is okay with slavery as we think of slavery. That is not the case. What's happening is the Israelites were just slaves. Every culture around them has slaves, not like we think about slaves, but slaves, indentured servants. The way to think about this is if you have a debt, let's say, I'll just put it in modern terms. You bought a car and then you lost your job and you can't keep paying for your car. Well, what are you going to do with that car? Nowadays it would get repoed. But back in ancient Israel, what they would do is they would work for the person that they bought it from. They would become an indentured servant and they would work off their debt. That is what a Hebrew slave is. Are you with me?
Yep.
So this is not a person who was stolen. This is not a person who was taken from their family. This is a person who has a debt to pay. The law... What?
That's what Joseph put in place.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. Perfect. The law is designed in such a way to provide justice to the people who are the most easily taken advantage of in their culture. Yet, it is still written to an ancient culture, a patriarchal culture, a culture that values men over women. So if we read the law with our cultural concepts in mind, we are going to have problems with how God set up the law for Israel. We have to remember that God set up the law for Israel. And so we're going to talk in here, for example, in verse 7, when a man sells his daughter as a slave. And you're like, well, that is so messed up. How could God ever be okay with something like this? I really liked the explanation. If you finished the book reading Moses Seeing Jesus, I really loved the explanation that they gave of the law as a stepping stone to something better. But it itself wasn't perfect. And I agree with that in a sense, but also it sort of assumes that we have it right and that they had it wrong and that they're getting closer to what we had by the law. Like they had worse and we have better, and the law is a stepping stone from worse to better. And I think that's a little bit of a prideful way to read the Bible. And so I want to avoid that while simultaneously being like, I think they have a good point about the law not being exactly the best thing for society, because although they are creating a space for the protection of people who could be taken advantage of, like a young girl, and that young girl will not be mistreated in her servitude, working off her father's debt. And as you go down, you find out it's more of a marriage relationship for her to work off her father's debt. It is the law of Israel, not of America.
So as I was reading through chapter 11, I was struck by that same...
Chapter 11?
That's in the book, in Moses.
Okay.
Reading
Yep.
Moses. But what I took away from it wasn't that we had better and they had worse and they were moving towards us.
But
The way I read it was the culture around them had worse.
Yes.
They were very likely to be doing what those around them were doing. And this was God moving them a step closer to Him.
And that's exactly right. For example, that law continues. If she does not please her master, he has no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has broken faith with her. He shall deal with her as a daughter. If he takes another wife, he shall not diminish the first wife's food or clothing or her marital rights. So it is like, why would God say that? It's because those are the things that would happen in other nations. And Israel is supposed to be better than the other nations and protect the people who are unable to protect themselves. So you're exactly right about that. So here we're dealing with slavery. We see right here the Sabbath year. When you have a Hebrew slave, he's going to serve you 6 years. In the 7th year, he'll go out free for nothing. What if he hasn't worked off the debt? You set him free.
Right.
And the debt is forgiven at that point. Why? Because you take care of Hebrew people. You pay what you owe, so they would go into slavery. But when that Sabbath year rolls around, even if they had only worked 1 year, what if it's like the 6th year of the cycle? Someone goes into slavery, they're in slavery for 1 year, and then the debt's forgiven on that 7th year because you take care of the people around you. And so these laws are set up around social justice, around caring for the poor, because it was the poor people who were going to accumulate the debt in the first place, right? That's no different than our society. It's the poor people who accumulate the debt, and the law is set up to provide for the people who are most easily taken advantage of and can't provide for themselves. Is that okay? Is that enough on slavery? Go ahead, Mark.
Oh. Yeah, when I read these things about slavery in the Bible, America today is really a modern version of slavery. If we were all still farmers and there were no jobs, and no companies to work for, there wouldn't be any need to be indentured to anyone. But when we go to work, it's because of money.
Yeah.
We need money to live.
I was thinking about this today. We have such a problem with pyramid schemes. Every job ever is a pyramid scheme.
Right.
Right? You're working for one person over you. There's probably 4 people at your level and 16 people below you. You could draw a triangle around every job in the world.
And it's all money.
It's all for money. Yeah, totally. Can't serve God and mammon. Okay, good on slavery.
when
Nope, okay. 3 hands went up.
It's
Let's
really
come to you
interesting.
first.
It's
Ellen.
not about slavery. I mean, so God is perfect,
Mhm.
of course, and so the 10 Commandments coming from God's mouth had to be perfect. But you just said the law was not perfect. Is that all of this? What the people decided how to interpret those 10?
I
Is that
don't
what
think
all
it's
of
so
this
much an
is?
interpretation. No, the laws that come after the 10 Commandments are still God speaking to
God
Moses on
speaking,
Sinai.
okay.
And I don't mean to say that it's not perfect, because it is the thing that brings humanity and God together when Jesus fulfills it, right? So I'm not trying to say it's not perfect. I'm just trying to say that I liked the explanation of that book, that it is a step away from what the nations around Israel were doing to something better. Although, and this is to their point as well, the Torah assumes that the law would be broken within the Torah. That, like, there was never even a chance of keeping the law. And yeah, is that okay? Okay.
So this is a little bit further down, but it's still about slavery. Chapter 20 and 21 seem in direct contradiction to 26 and 27. Basically, it says that if you have a slave, you can beat them, and as long as they don't die of internal injuries for 2 days, you don't owe anything, because they're your property. And then later in 26 and 27, it's if you hurt him, take his eye or break a tooth, then he goes free. So I don't understand the difference between taking an eye and beating someone to death.
So if you beat your slave,
Yeah,
and they die, you killed them.
in 2 days.
Well, just like they die immediately,
Yeah.
you are culpable for killing that person and pay with your life. If they don't die immediately, but they die later on, then there's the question of what was the cause of death. So it's like, did you kill them, or did they have a compromised immune system and get a cold and die? And so then it's, what you lost in that instance was your money from them working for you to pay you back. But if you poke their eye out, then this is called the lex talionis, which as Latin, it would most closely mean like the law of fairness. If you cause someone to lose an eye, the punishment is that you should lose an eye. If you cause someone to lose a tooth, the punishment is that you should lose a tooth. And Jesus is going to talk about that law in the Sermon on the Mount. And his response is, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the left. You had your hand up.
I thought it was kind of interesting in chapter 21, verse 32, where it sets the price of the slave at 30 shekels.
Yep, and that's going to come up again at the end of Leviticus.
Okay.
The value of a slave, yeah. Hold on, Carrie had her hand up, and then we had one in the back too.
One thing that I've noticed a lot in history, when they're talking about capital or corporal punishment, where you can beat somebody, it was also in the military, your kid, or for civil, like you break a law, you could get whipped for all kinds of stuff. So it bothers us, because if you get a traffic ticket, you don't get whipped. You don't get whipped for disobeying an order in the military anymore. But even up through the 18th century, throughout the world, that was kind of duh for everybody.
Yeah, we've established different punitive measures because we figured that people hurt more if you take their money than their pain.
So the slaves were folks that had a debt to pay.
Basically, yeah.
So the person who gained the slave, that the slave literally became that person's property
Until the Sabbath year, yes.
So they can do whatever they want.
Basically.
To Paul, because he doesn't die.
And up until you take their eye, you take their tooth, you physically harm, you kill them, because they're still a person. And I think that's really what this is coming down to, is you still treat them like a person. And if you don't, if you treat them like an animal, if you are beating them and whipping them, then you're going to be in danger of this law being affected on you. Yeah. I've got 20 minutes till we're done. Okay, real quick.
I still don't understand why the man would sell his daughter, and I know you were talking about that, and also, I know it's supposed to be explained in Moses. Will it be, do you have anything to add?
I can add to it now. It will come up again later, but I would say that giving your daughter in marriage would normally get you a bride price. So.
Is that what this is talking about, marriage?
Well, it's, yeah.
Sells his daughter as a slave.
Sells his daughter as a slave, but then it goes on to say.
Verse 10.
If he takes another wife to himself, meaning that the slave is a slave wife, he shall not diminish her food, clothing, or marital rights. So the slave is also receiving marital rights, which means going to bed. And so she is acting like a bride, and normally when a father gives away his daughter, he gets a bride price. Right. So what if he owes money? He could give away his daughter, and instead of receiving a bride price, have the debt.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what this is on.
And then when it said, deal with her as a daughter, that's if he takes her not for himself, but for his son. Further down.
For his son, he shall do with her as a daughter.
Verse
Right.
9.
Yep, exactly, verse 9.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, all right. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out.
Oh.
But there's no harm. Harm to who? Right? Because if the child comes out, it's had harm.
Yeah.
Right? So this is talking about the woman. Okay. Some people are not going to like me after this. But there's no harm, meaning the woman was not injured. The one who hit her shall be fined, as the woman's husband, which would be the child's father, shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. Which means that the value of an unborn child here, I'm not talking about today, I'm not making any political statements, the value of an unborn child here is money, not life for life. Are you with me? Okay. But if there is harm, meaning the woman, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for burn for burn, wound for wound, and strike for strike. When a man strikes the eye of a slave, it keeps going. Okay. So this is probably one of the single most quoted passages when dealing with abortion. So I wanted to read it very clearly and have you think on it. I don't really want to get into a politically fueled conversation on abortion here. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, let me move on. Good. 22, starting at verse 33 of 21 and going on into 22, these are dealing with societal laws and how to be a good neighbor. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and he kills it, he has to repay 5 oxen for an ox, or 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there's no blood guilt. Why? Because make my day law. They have it in Israel. So if you kill a guy breaking in, you're not responsible for murder. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. Meaning, like, if he's caught with the stuff later, if the sun has risen on him, like if it's discovered what he has to pay it back. And if he doesn't have it because he sold it, then he shall be sold to pay for the things that he stole. Whether it's an ox, donkey, he pays double. So these are all laws dealing with societal relations. If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a beast to keep safe and it dies or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by Yahweh shall be between them to see whether or not he put his hand to his neighbor's property. In other words, they're going to go to the priests at the tabernacle, and the priests are going to determine if someone's at fault. There has to be a restitution. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor and is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. Why? Because there's that idea that he was being responsible and he couldn't do anything about it. Or was he not being responsible and something died that was in his care because of his lack of responsibility, then he has to pay for it. Coming down further, we get into the laws of social justice. And I want to just sort of jump down here to verses 21 through 24. You shall not wrong a sojourner, which is what? A stranger or a Gentile, or oppress him. Why? For you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat a widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, and then that begs the question, by the way, again, why? Because it says you shall not wrong a sojourner, and then gives a reason, and then the reason is that they were sojourners. And then says you shall not mistreat a widow or fatherless child, but then it doesn't give the reason. And I think the reason is actually, although it's omitted, I think the reason is the same.
Right.
It's because before you entered into this relationship with God, you were widows. You were fatherless children. And that's the picture that Paul's going to carry into the New Testament in Ephesians chapter 5 of the relationship between husband and wife. It represents the relationship between God and the kingdom of God. Specifically, he says Christ and his church, but if we take that and apply it to the Old Testament, I want to put it that way.
So just real quick, that also applies to those who are the most easily abused.
Exactly. So the sojourner is easily abused, the widow is easily abused, the fatherless child is easily abused. If you do mistreat them and they cry out to me, I will hear their cry and my wrath will burn and I will kill you with the sword. And your wives shall be widows and your children fatherless. So if you mistreat a fatherless child, your kids will be fatherless. And if you mistreat a widow, your wife will be a widow.
But that's not saying it's going to happen right away.
It could take
years.
Sure. Yeah. It could. But I love that picture. Like, if you mistreat an orphan, your kids are going to be orphans. What's that?
Retribution theology.
That's 100%. From here to the end of Deuteronomy is retribution theology. Absolutely. And then, was there anything else in this chapter? 26. Don't take someone's cloak and pledge. If you take someone's cloak and pledge, return it to him before the sun goes down. Why? Because it's his only covering. What theme are we dealing with? Atonement. You don't take away someone's covering and keep it from them in order to get them to pay you back. That's not the thing that you're allowed to use, because the covering is really, really important, both to the person individually and as a theological symbol. Okay. And then 29 through 31, you shall not delay to offer from the fullness of your harvest, from the outflow of your presses, the firstborn of your sons you shall give to me, and you shall do the same with your oxen and sheep. In the case of the animals, 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. And how do those days line up with the son? What's done with the first, well, not just the firstborn, but any male child on the 8th day?
Circumcision.
That's the day they're circumcised. So the same day that the firstborn animal of a ox or a sheep is taken to the tabernacle and sacrificed, on the altar killed, that is the same day that a male child has the covering of flesh removed. Does that make sense? Okay. In 23. Okay, this is another big one, coming back to bearing false witness. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with the many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many so as to pervert justice, nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his lawsuit. So that's basically an explanation of what it means to bear false witness. Just a little bit of elaboration. I think that's good. Go ahead.
So what does it mean when it says that the child, the firstborn, is given to him? And not only what does that mean?
Yes.
And does the first child have a choice?
They did at Passover. When they put the blood on the doorpost, they made the choice to be alive but dedicated to God, or not put the blood on the doorpost and be killed and dedicated to God in a sense. By putting the blood on the doorpost, God would say later on, I think we talked about this last week, I think you weren't here, was that all the firstborn children of Israel, all the firstborn males, they now belong to me. When we get up into Numbers, we're going to see those firstborn children bought back by the people of Israel from God in a deal that God strikes with them. It happens in Numbers chapter 3. It's really interesting.
But what's the definition? What does it actually mean when it says they are mine? So is the firstborn son doing some rite ritual or something?
In the same sense that the firstborn animals belong to God, and you take them to the tabernacle and kill them, you would take your firstborn son to the tabernacle and pay money, the value of the person, to bring the person back with you. So you're literally buying them back or redeeming them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Would that be 30 shekels too, just like the slave? Or is it bigger?
No, I don't think it's 30. The amount specified in Leviticus 27. I don't remember what it is.
I thought it was 15 for a boy and 6 for a girl.
I don't remember. You might be right, but I don't remember. Great question, though. Yeah, and Numbers chapter 3, we're going to get to this whole thing about God trading the firstborn for the Levites. so that the Levites belong to him. And then when there's too many firstborn and there's less Levites, they have to pay money to get the extra firstborn. It's this whole weird deal between Israel and God. You shall not pervert justice due to your poor in his lawsuit. Keep far from a false charge and do not kill the innocent and righteous. For I will not acquit the wicked, and you shall take no bribe, for the bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a sojourner. You know the heart of a sojourner, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. So far we've hit 4 of the big 5 groups where the law applies social justice. Those 5 groups are the poor, the widow, the orphan, the sojourner, and the Levite. And those are 5 groups specifically who, throughout the law, are going to be unable to provide for themselves, easily taken advantage of, easily disadvantaged, and the law is going to continually talk about how Israel is supposed to provide for those 5 groups of people. We haven't really hit the Levites yet because that's going to come after Mount Sinai when they're set apart from all the other tribes. Cool? So if I ask you next week about the big 5, are you going to be able to tell me the poor, the widow, the orphan, the sojourner, and the Levite?
In that order.
It doesn't have to be in order, but those 5 are really, really important to understanding the message of social justice in the law. Then we come down to laws about Sabbaths and festivals. You have the Sabbath year every 7 years. You let all the slaves go free. You don't plant in the fields so that the fields get rest, but anything that grows in them anyway is for the poor people to eat, and whatever the poor people don't eat, the beasts of the field can eat. You do likewise with your vineyard, with your olive orchard. Then you have the Sabbath day. So you have the Sabbath year and you have the Sabbath day. And the Sabbath day is every 7th day. You don't do any work. Why? So that your ox and your donkey and your son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. What is the purpose, according to this verse, for the Sabbath? It's rest, but really it's social justice for the people who otherwise don't get a break. It's the slave, it's the poor, it's your servant woman, it's the alien, which is another word for sojourner. So Sabbath is being associated again with social justice. And then the 3 feasts that you have to keep every year. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, you keep it in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Egypt. You shall keep the Feast of the Harvest of the first fruits of your labor, and you shall keep the Feast of Ingathering at the end of the year. And 3 times in a year all your males shall appear before the Lord. These are 3 of the 7 feasts that are going to be in Leviticus chapter 23, and we're going to study these in much greater detail when we get there. Is that okay?
Is the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, is that the same as?
Exactly the same. Yes,
Passover?
exactly. Not as the Passover, but the Feast of Unleavened Bread is 7 days, and the Passover is 1 day. But it is the same Feast of Unleavened Bread that we talked about in Exodus with the Passover. Yes?
So I had a question. Just a comment, I guess. Verse 13, it's about all that I've said to you, be circumspect and make no mention of the name of other gods, nor let it be heard from your mouth. So it just struck me heavy because we talk about other gods all the time.
Sure. I mean, yeah. Mostly me. Yeah.
But it just seems like, we are forbidden.
Sure.
Well, maybe they don't mean like speak of them. Could it be that he's talking about maybe certain rituals that they do where they...
I think it's certainly talking about worship, but he takes it a step further than that, and he even says, make no mention of the names of other gods. So, if I talk about Ra, am I breaking the law?
Yeah.
Yep.
No, because God in his word has the names of other gods in it.
Ooh.
Right.
So then are the authors, the human authors who wrote down those names, are they breaking the law?
Dun dun dun.
That's semantic, it feels like.
I don't think it means to recognize that they
Exist.
but that you are in any way associated.
I think that's right, and I think that it's using extreme or maybe incredulous, if you will, language to make that point.
Well, there's also a theme of somebody's name their name gets not talked about when they're cursed.
Yeah, totally.
There's a lot of that.
Oh, that theme is so cool when you get to the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, because Lazarus, who was poor during his life, no one would have known his name, is the only person who a name is ever given of in any parable, in any gospel. And then the rich man is nameless.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, sorry, in regards to Yahweh, though.
Yes.
How we say it, but the Jews wouldn't say it.
That's right.
So, because his name is so different.
Well, it's interesting because Moses wrote it lots, right? It's all over the place. But if you're reading a Bible, if you're reading in Hebrew, you come to the word, it's called the Tetragrammaton, the name of God, and you don't say Yahweh, you say Adonai, even though that's not the word on paper. And that was out of respect. You would never go to a synagogue and hear them worshiping Yahweh. It would always be Adonai, even when the word on paper is Yahweh.
He didn't command them to do it.
That's true, but
That started in the
I think that's
Babylonian captivity.
okay. I trust you.
To try to avoid breaking the don't take the Lord's name thing. But
interesting.
that didn't really start until the Babylonian captivity.
I learned
Carrie,
something.
when
Thank
did
you.
it start?
She said that started around the Babylonian captivity. Okay, yes.
A lot of the literature that I read from Israel now spells God without the O.
G
Right.
apostrophe or hyphen D.
Hyphen.
Yep, same reason. Yeah, absolutely. Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice, and do not rebel against him, for I will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. What's this talking about? What is the thing that is going to guard them on the way and bring them or lead them to the place that's prepared, the promised land? The pillar of cloud and by day and fire by night. It's talking about what we call the Shekinah glory, even though that term doesn't appear anywhere in Scripture. Wait, I thought that was the presence of God, and here it's saying it's an angel. Right? But his name, for my name, is in him. Are you with me? So is the cloud Yahweh?
Yes.
Yes. Is the cloud an angel?
Yeah.
Yes.
So would that be the same way as maybe like we are his temple and he is in us and we've been sealed by the Holy Spirit kind of thing? Like he's
In a sense.
like
In a
human,
sense, yes.
but also God.
Yeah, I would say in a sense, but I think it's more closely related to the idea of the messenger being associated with the message and the sender. And I think that's going to become clear right down here. When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and I blot them out, you shall not bow down to their gods or serve them, but you shall utterly overthrow them. Okay, so when my angel goes before you and I blot them out, do you see that?
Yeah.
So you have a change in pronouns going on there, where the messenger, the angel, or in Hebrew the malach, which just means messenger, is associated with the one sending him. So the angel of the Lord and the Lord in the Hebrew mind are much less separated than they are in our mind. Because of how we like to think about angels, it doesn't really match up with how Hebrew people thought about angels. We've talked about that a bunch. You won't bow down to their gods. You shall serve Yahweh your God, and he will bless you with bread and water. No one shall miscarry. I will send my terror before you, and I will send hornets before you. I won't drive them out all at once in 1 year, but I'll do it a little at a time so that the land doesn't grow wild before you. I'll set your border from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. That was the original dimensions. If you imagine the Red Sea on the side of Egypt, which would be on the west side of the Sinai Peninsula, all the way to the Euphrates River, that is the land that God promised to Israel if they would go in and conquer it. Is that the land that Israel possesses? It's not. So, I'm not going to make any political comments. And you shall make no covenant with them or their gods, and shall not dwell in the land. Then, okay, man, we're out of time. Can I have like 3 extra minutes tonight? Is that okay? Okay, thank you so much. The covenant confirmed. All the people answered with one voice. Ready? Are you ready? Are you with me? All the people answered with one voice and said, "Oh, the Lord has spoken, we will do." Okay, and Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord, and he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars, and he sent young men, and they sacrificed sacrifices at the altars. And Moses took half the blood and threw it against the altar, and he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And all said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do, and will be obedient. And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people. Gross.
Fun.
And said, behold, the covenant that Yahweh has made with you in accordance with all these words. The covenant is enacted with blood. The Noahic covenant was enacted by the blood of all the people who died in the flood. The Abrahamic covenant was enacted by the blood of the animals that the flaming torch and smoking pot moved through. And the Mosaic covenant is enacted by the blood of bulls and goats being thrown onto the people. So far we've had 3 covenants, and all 3 have been enacted in blood. So do you think the blood of the covenant is an important theme? Do you think the New Testament is going to use the theme of the blood of the covenant to describe how Jesus fulfills the law?
Yep.
Wow.
Totally. Okay. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders went up. Okay, here's where we need to end tonight. I need a different picture. Don't save. Do you remember this picture from way back? Eden?
Yeah.
How many levels were in Eden? You had the midst, you had the garden, you had Eden, and then you had outside of Eden. Okay. Now, where'd that mountain go? I'm going to have to minimize everything to get to it. Minimize that. Minimize summary. Where'd it go? Mountain. Okay. So Moses is allowed to go up to the top of the mountain. Right? But then you have the 70 elders and Nadab and Abihu. They are allowed to go part of the way up the mountain. Then you have the camp of Israel. They are not allowed to go up the mountain. And then you have outside of Israel. Aaron would be with Nadab and Abihu and the 70 elders. Yep, part of the way up the mountain. So what you have in this picture of Eden is something equivalent to the midst, the garden, Eden, and then outside. Isn't that neat? So cool. This is going to become even more prevalent when we get to the design of the tabernacle and the temple and how that mirrors what Sinai was. So I want to end on that, but gosh, I'm missing things if I end there. The 70 go up, and they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. So picture in your mind for a second what it would look like if someone paved this room with sapphire and it was super clear. Do you think maybe you might describe that as a sea of glass?
I was just going to say that.
So good, right? Revelation chapter 4, it's the throne room of God that John's describing, and it matches perfectly the description of the place where God is on Sinai. And what do they do when they get there? They eat and drink. They share a meal with God, which is just so good. Sharing a meal with God is going to come up in the peace offering. It's going to come up in communion that Jesus institutes for the church, and it's going to come up in Revelation 19 with the marriage supper of the Lamb. God wanting to be with us and share a meal with us is just utterly carried from Eden to the end, all the way through.
So did they literally, is that literal they saw God?
I knew someone was going to ask that. I think for the time being, I want to ask us to put "no one has ever seen God and lived" into a box. And just take this for what it says, that they saw the God of Israel, and decide what to do with it later. Because we haven't developed enough of a Torah theology yet to be able to really answer that question well. Which is also my way of saying I don't want to get into it right now. Are we okay?
Yeah.
I'm 4 minutes over. I said 3, but I'm 4. Mark, would you pray for us tonight?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Lord, we just want to thank you for this time that we've had, and thank you for John, and Lord, just all the preparation, and the excitement that he brings, Lord, to just help open up your word to us so that we can just see it just drilling down so deep, Father, and we're just so thankful for this class, for this time we have, and just for all the things that we're learning, Lord. And so I just pray you bless John. I pray you bless everyone here for the time and effort that they put into study to prepare as well. And just continue, Father, just to show us your truths as they are and as we should understand them, Father. Also, just thank you for everyone here who adds to the discussion and participates. We just learn so much from each other. It's such a blessing, Lord. And we just ask for safe travel home, and we lift the rest of this time up to you. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. Really enjoying this class. Keep an eye on your emails tomorrow. I'm going to send something out like I do every week that will have good information for you to have and think about throughout the week. I'm also going to attach a video. It'll be 5 to 10 minutes, and I would really encourage you to watch it, especially because we are not reading a book right now because we just finished our last one and haven't started our next one. So take 5 to 10 minutes and watch that video at some point throughout the week, and just kind of be in thought and in prayer and in meditation on the Word. So, thank you, guys.